Like, do we have?
So they asked me to just talk a little bit about...
Well, we're going to do some introductions first.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry.
And we're going to do...
Okay, there we go. This is good.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Tony Ciccarello. I'm the headmaster at Somerville High School. And I want to welcome students and staff from Arlington High School who are joining us here this morning, and we sincerely welcome you here. I also want to welcome students from our performing arts class, our drama class, our drama program, and our music programs. I want to thank our custodial staff because in the last 48 hours, this auditorium has been undergoing some repairs, and we're preparing for our own musical. I'm going to give our musical a plug, which is How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. That performance is going to take place February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, Friday evening at 8, Saturday evening at 8, and Sunday matinee at 2. I want to thank Mr. Navalis and his students who put together the slide presentation that's running in the background. Today we are honored and privileged to have as our guest speaker Ms. Olympia Dukakis, star of stage and screen. Ms. Dukakis is a graduate of the Southern Junior High School in Somerville and Arlington High School. Today's event is the result of an effort by Ms. Barbara Mangum, parent of Matt and Laura Boyle, members of our senior and sophomore classes respectively, to bring Ms. Dukakis to Somerville, and we thank you. I'm going to introduce Ms. Mangum, who is going to do the formal introduction.
Well, I'm probably going to disappoint you all in that I'm not going to do a really very long introduction. I'm just going to turn the floor really over to Olympia, who's been, really wonderful to come and talk to you all. She does lots of master classes. You all know that she won an Academy Award for supporting actress in Moonstruck. You know that she's been in over, I think, 150 plays and won many other awards for, her work there, and also in TV and all kinds of things. So she's got tons of experience, and I hope you'll take advantage of all that experience and training and teaching skills to ask her some deep and penetrating questions. Okay, and now it's to Mr. Dukakis.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Well, as they said, I moved here from Lowell. And we lived up on Monroe Street, at the street of the High Tower. And it was a very volatile time. People asked me about what Somerville was like then, and this was in the late 40s. And it was all of the drama that our adults were acting out, the ethnic conflicts that were going on, they also happened with us on the street. And so by the time I was 12, I carried a knife. Now, that sounds, you think to yourself, yeah, look at him, he's looking, you say, what, carried a knife? Yeah, I carried a knife. Did I use it? No. Did I brandish it? Yes. And who did we fight? We fought the Irish. That's what we fought. Well, of course, later on when I got older, became my best friends. But there you are. So that, to me, those are my first memories of Somerville, was just surviving, getting from the school to my home. And at one point, I got tied to a tree. I had my socks stuffed in my mouth. I mean, you know, it was like, it was quite those are my first memories of Somerville. The next thing for me was sports. I loved sports. It actually was for me, it was really what got me through all my teenage years. I loved all sports, and I started playing them in Somerville. We started to play. I remember, no, at the Pope School we played dodgeball and basketball at Southern Junior High, but at those days, the girls didn't have a court. We never had time on the court. So we used to come up here in the hallways and practice dribbling. That's, I remember vividly, we'd come here after school and the lights were dim. They weren't really strong lights. I mean, those are the memories that really flood in for me with Somerville. It was the years we were here when we first came here, when I was in the Pope School. That's when the Second World War ended, and I remember the celebrations and everything. So I have a lot of mixed memories. I remember the Greek community where I went and went to Greek school, except my father had a big argument with the priest, and we left that church. We had to go to the one in Boston, and I didn't want to do that. And I told my father I wanted to go to the Salvation Army. I had a friend, Miriam Hale, whose parents were in the Salvation Army, so I went to the Salvation Army and went to their camps. It was like, so my experience in Somerville was very, I don't know that you would call it traditional, necessarily normal, necessarily, grassroots American, I don't know what, but it was of the time. The things that I dealt with and confronted were of the time when I was here. And we've moved to Arlington, I remember we would play Somerville in basketball. And Medford was the big, is Medford big for Somerville? But Medford was big for Arlington. And I do remember, though, that the 4 years that I was in Arlington High School, we were New England hockey champs. I mean, there was evidently a very good. There were a lot of lakes and ponds around there, so everybody grew up with a stick in their hand and stuff. I had nothing to do with theater growing up in high school, nothing. My brother, on the other hand, did. He became very involved with the high school drama club. He was first violinist in the band. I mean, he was more part of what you might call the art scene. For me, it was nothing but sports. Because I was very aggressive and very competitive and willing to fight. Because I'd been fighting. I'd been fighting on the streets in Somerville, Lowell. The first time I actually remember having fights on the street were with a couple of Syrian boys, and so there were always these fights going on all the time. And I remember some mother complaining to the house that I had done something to her son. And I remember my mother saying, I don't interfere with what my daughter does on the street. The message was clear. You have to figure it out yourself. You got to survive out there yourself. You got to do that. I mean, fortunately, we didn't have drugs. There were no guns. There were just little knives, that kind of thing. But for me, it was these are lasting memories that have been very important. The willingness to stand up and, take a position on something, for me, got born in the streets of Somerville. Drawing a line and saying, no, you don't go over that line. No, you don't treat me that way. That got born in the streets of Somerville. That I didn't change my name. That was the streets of Somerville. They wanted me to change my name, and probably it would have been smart to, but I couldn't. I'd fought too many battles over my name. Because you know what happens. The first thing people go after is your name, what you look like, the food you eat, the religion you've got. I mean, you know, kids are very precise about what they attack. So, so I look back and I think those years really kind of put me, there were certain things I ended up valuing, and certainly my name was one of them. And not to mention that I knew that it would break my parents' hearts if I changed my name, which was another thing. But I think for me it was just, no, I'm not changing my name. Why should I change my name? I'm as good as anybody, which was a big thing about the sports. I was there to prove that I could not only be as good, I was better. So that's how I kind of entered the arts, if you can believe it, with that kind of. So of course I was very competitive, and it took me a while to learn. And the sports I was good in, of individual sports, and especially ones where I had like a weapon in my hand. I was good at fencing. I was New England fencing champ for 3 years. I was on the Massachusetts riflery team. I was captain of the tennis team. I mean, I list these not because but just to show the pattern of, I wasn't good at team sports. I never looked to a team any place to help me. I never thought there would be a group that would help me. I thought, I have to do this myself. So I had to learn to really play with other people, because I would get on the stage and I wanted to win. I wanted to be better than anybody. I wanted to be noticed. I wanted to, you know. Then when I got to New York, I realized with those reviews that if I didn't stand out, well, I was not going to get anywhere. So I'd psych it out, see who was doing what, watch this, watch that. It's a little bit like fencing. What are the moves? What are they good at? What are they not good at? What can I do that could bounce, come off the stage? So eventually, though I had a crisis about that, I didn't even want to act. And I realized that the initial feeling of play, of participation had totally gone. And I started to figure out how I was going to really play with people. Because it's vulnerable to play with people, to really play with them, to let go of what you want to do in protecting yourself or showing yourself off or proving this and that about yourself. So to drop that and to just kind of play, to hang out without an ulterior motive was a difficult thing for me. And now, you know, I'm like in my 20s, my late 20s, my early 30s, all this is happening. It's not like but eventually I got hold of it, thank God. Got hold of what it was to do that, and began to really enjoy my work instead of using it to prove this and prove that and the other thing. I don't know what you expected me to talk about, but I feel like everyone that ends up, let me just talk about theater, although I think it's true for all the arts, has their own journey. It doesn't look like somebody else's journey, and it doesn't read like the magazines, or does it read like what's on Entertainment Tonight. And everyone's entitled to their own journey and the things that they have to do to get there, and the things they have to go through to get there, and what they need to confront in themselves to get there. And it doesn't make one person's journey better than the other. It just makes it uniquely theirs. And you have to, I think, claim yours. Because there are things that I said today that I'm not particularly proud of. So, but you have to claim it. You have to say, yeah, those things are running around. Yeah, that is this. You have to be honest with yourself so that you can unstick yourself when you need to unstick yourself so you can keep going and growing and, you know. Happy message, everybody. I'm certainly willing to talk about the people that I've worked with. I know people are always interested in what is it like working with Cher and things of that sort. And so, I mean, that's all part of it, you know. My life changed in '88. I was running a theater. When I graduated from graduate school here in Boston, a group of us started a theater called the Actors Company, and then we went on and it became the Charles Playhouse, which is still there, actually. The Blue Man Group, I think, is settled into that place. And then I went to, then I went to New York. After that, I then got involved in starting another theater, the Whole Theater, which I ran for about 19 years. So whereas other people might go directly to LA or do this or that, I really, it's interesting because even though I was so unable to participate in a kind of community, there was always the desire down deep for that. So I ended up starting theaters with other people. And that was a wonderful period of time. It was about 19 years I did that, and we raised our children. In Jersey, we had a regional theater in Jersey. Something like the Huntington or ART is exactly what we were like, just to identify. Okay, so what's on your minds? Yeah, what's on your mind? No, you just...
So, I'm interested in that you were primarily a sports person in high school. So what was your first venture to do?
What was my first one?
First venture in the theater.
Well, when I was in college, I went to Sargent. Sargent was phys ed. So I went to this college and discovered that there were women who were incredible athletes. I wasn't one of them. I was a good athlete. I was certainly competitive. But I mean, they were extraordinary. I mean, there's a woman now who's hanging on the walls at BU, Janet DeMars, who was All-American lacrosse, All-American this, All-American. I mean, these were. So while I was there, I got selected to write and direct a review representing our class in a school competition. Why they selected me, to tell you the truth, I'm puzzled by it. At any rate, I was very happy. I found myself happier than I'd ever been. And it was a crisis. I wanted to leave school, etc., but there wasn't any money. I was already on work scholarship, so I changed my major and became and got a scholarship from the National Foundation of Infantile Paralysis to train as a physical therapist. And then I went out and did 4 polio epidemics, and I saved my money, and went back to school, came back to Boston University. And my first play that I ever did was a play, Lorca play, Garcia Lorca, a Spanish writer, called The Shoemaker's Prodigious Wife. I'd never been on a stage before, and I was in a graduate department. Why they selected me, God only knows. They didn't audition in those days. And I think the fact that I was a Boston University undergraduate may have been helpful to me. But I had one of the great teachers, Peter Cass, was one of the great American teachers. I was just fortuitous, just lucked out. He'd come from New York for about 3 or 4 days every week and teach and then go back and stuff. And he was extraordinary. He was the first one who insisted that I stop hiding my ethnicity, which I hid. And because I didn't feel that the way I expressed myself, people would find approving. So and he was the one that kept pushing me till finally, I remember one day I just kind of exploded. all of that happened, and he was very supportive, very incredible support, incredibly supportive. So that's how it started for me, and then a group of us then went on to start the Actors Company on Charles Street, and that moved over to, I think it's Warrington Street, and we called ourselves the Charles Playhouse because, to let everybody know that we were the theater from Charles Street, and so I stayed another couple of years, then I went to New York, got my first part, and and then the drama that I mentioned about how do I get ahead, et cetera, was. But during the time that I was working with people I'd studied with, that competitiveness was at a kind of a minimum. But once I got to New York, boy, bang, I realized you can't just sit here quietly. You've got to push yourself. You've got to do this. So that's how it got started for me.
If I might interrupt, what the TV people would like is if you have a question, if you would go to that mic so that they can hear what the question is, okay? So people just kind of get in line.
I think they're trying to record
Would you mind
this.
that? Yeah, they're trying to.
No, I don't. Whatever you want.
Is this on? All right. I have one question. How do you prepare yourself for an upcoming role you're going to be in?
I prepare myself as much as I can. There's a certain preparation that never stops. I'm always physically trying to keep myself strong and flexible. My voice, my body, it's very, very important. That discipline, just got to take it on. I try to watch what I eat. It's like an ongoing. It doesn't mean that I don't indulge at certain times, I do, but I really try to. And I'm fortunate. I married a man who is even more disciplined than I am. He was extraordinary. He's 82 right now, and he's still working on his voice. It's like amazing to me, just amazing. It makes me, actually moves me, that kind of insistence. I do that. That's one part of it, the general kind of thing. And then I try to understand how I can get into the world of the play. What do I need to get there? What information do I need? What do I need to understand? Just generally, like the show I'm doing now in Boston Rose, I needed to know what shtetl life was in the Ukraine. I needed to know what it was like in Warsaw before the war. I needed to know what the ghetto was like. I needed to know what it was to survive in the sewers, which is what this woman does. I needed to know what she then tries to get to Palestine on a boat, but meets an American sailor, comes back to Atlantic City with him. Need to know what Atlantic City was like then. And so all of that, trying to fill yourself up with all as much information so that you feel comfortable in that world so you can get into the world. And then there's the work on the text. In this particular case, I memorized the lines before I got to rehearsal. There was 74 pages of dialogue, top, bottom, margin to margin. That took me 3 months. And I almost quit a couple of times. I thought, I can't do this. And yet it was my husband who would say to me, why don't you wait till tomorrow? Don't make any decisions feeling the way you do. Wait till the morning. And, he was very, and I did. And then by the morning I would think, I'll get back in there. I'll get back in there and see what I can. So so just then the text itself, what is it really about? What's important to this character? How is that reflected in the different scenes as it moves forward? I had to spend a lot of time with the dialect. I did not have a good Yiddish. There are a lot of people in New York, that you can go and hear Yiddish, still today, Yiddish, not only Yiddish spoken, but people speaking with Yiddish accents. But I thought I could pick it up, but I couldn't, so I had to go to a dialect coach. And that took, it took me 3 months. to do a Yiddish accent, to be able to talk like this and not feel like I was, that it was really me talking, saying things.
Thanks.
When you first got your start in acting and you really began to get into it, was there any one person in particular that inspired you to keep pursuing that?
Well, this teacher was great, Peter Cass. He was. But in terms of acting, seeing somebody act, there was an actress called Florence Eldridge, and she was married to an actor named Frederick March. You probably, I haven't even seen any, but the stuff of theirs on the screen, although he was a very popular actor, screen actor. They did a play, Long Day's Journey into Night, which was by Eugene O'Neill. And I was at a graduate school here in Boston, and they were at the Wilbur doing this. It was a very interesting, really incredible production. And I remember seeing her, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with that play. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar with that play? Some not. You haven't. You don't read that play, I guess, in high school. Well, it's a long play. It's like its name. It's really lengthy and complex. So, but she, at the very end, this woman who's taking drugs, actually she's shooting up heroin, at the end, she has really finally managed to really move away from total reality. And she's standing there with her wedding gown, and she's talking about what it was like. She says, oh, when I was young, this was happening, that was happening, and she said, I don't remember what happened. And she says, oh, yes, I do. I married James Tyrone, and I was happy for a while, is the way it ends. It's the last scene moment in the play. So she is standing there. First of all, I watched her the whole night, and I was like glued, the third act, where she starts to get really high, and the way she wandered around and on the stage, and the way she handled the past, how it seemed like she could float above the worst problems, and then every once in a while it would crack and something would come up, and then she'd float around, she'd get herself to float around again. Well, by the end of the play, of course, she's really, but she's standing, this is what was incredible to me. She's standing there with her wedding gown, saying this speech, smiling, and the tears like a river are going down her face. And she's smiling. And I looked and I said, where are those tears coming from? It was amazing to me. Amazing. I was so moved, and I thought, and as I walked out of the theater, I had this secret thought, I can do that. I can do that. I mean, I didn't say it to anybody, of course, but I knew inside, I thought to myself, I can do that. I can do that. But she was like a standard for me. She showed me, she said, can you do this? Can you do that? And whether or not I would step up to the plate. I mean, to me, that's always what these inspirations are about. Whether or not you really feel when you see someone do something, could you step up to that plate? Could you do that? I guess it's still sports, isn't it? Like stepping up to the plate, but that's what it was.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Besides the fact that you were very competitive, are there any things that, like, are you glad that you played sports before you got into acting?
Oh, sure.
Are there things you used, like, in acting that you remember using in sports or anything like that?
What was the last one?
Are there, like, skills you used in sports that you'd use in acting or anything?
Well, you know where sports has really helped me? In teaching. Because using sports and the language of sports and the physicality of sports and the activity of it is a good crossover for acting. It's like you see, like guys tend to, when they work, be more active, willing to push their agenda, what they want in a scene, you know. So for girls to take on that kind of activity, for them to really, because what you do when you go on stage is you really, you know, work for, you fight for, you get behind your character, what that character wants. You got to get behind, you got to do the things that that character does. You got to do it, you have to be active. So just learning to be active in a scene is good. You know, so the sports do have a kind of crossover. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Why did you make that decision to keep your background and your ethnicity a secret? Or
Why did I what?
make that decision to keep your background or your ethnicity away from the public, or
I'm sorry, why did I make the decision to do what with my ethnicity?
to keep it a secret or something you said earlier?
To keep it secret?
Yes, to hide it.
Because I grew up in a world my world, I mean, my father would say, when we would start going in the house, you shut the windows, do you want them all to know we're Greeks? You know, that's what, so there was something about the way we expressed ourselves that I got that would not be acceptable in the WASP world. It was not acceptable. And my father signaled that for me, and he was right. When I got into high school, there was no other Greek, well, I think maybe there was some Italians. There were Italians, but there was no other Greeks there and stuff. And I found that to be true. We had to behave like what we called the Americans. I know that's ridiculous, because who the hell is not from someplace else? And who is an American? Who isn't American? But you know, we're talking now about a 12-year-old girl here. We're not talking about, and that kind of thing. It was so. There were things about myself. You see, in my family, if you felt something strongly, you expressed it strongly. That was not the case necessarily. So for me to express, first of all, anger, that was like, and that period anyhow, women didn't do that, period. But if you were ethnic, you had more of a proclivity to do it. People would think you were fighting, and you weren't fighting, you were just talking. I mean, my kids refer to our family as the loud family. We're just loud, you know. I remember my daughter brought some boyfriend home, and he was there half an hour, and he was out the door. And I said, "What's he doing out there?" And so she went out, and they were talking, and he came back, and this guy, and she said, "Well, he says we're having a fight." And I looked at her, I said, "We're not fighting." She says, "I know, Mommy, but you're yelling." So it was, so all of that stuff. The fact that I could cry so easily and just, you know, that you could cry and get angry, you know, the fact that all of that stuff, there was, the fact that I could get physical, that didn't trouble me. That was another thing. And this guy, Peter Cass, he was actually himself first generation from Russia, a Jewish guy, and he spotted that. He was able to, and he did it, interestingly enough, in the way he taught it, the way he was not even by what he said, was by who he was. That he was willing to put his feelings on the line, that he didn't like something, he would come out of him. I mean, you know, it was like, oh, in this room, it was safe to have all that happen. He made that. So if you'll end up looking for an acting teacher, when you walk into the room, see if you can get the feeling that it's safe for you to be who you believe yourself to be.
Thanks.
Hi, Mrs. Dukakis. I'm sorry. I'm just curious, is it easier for you to get into a character?
Fix the mic. There.
Thank you.
Now, when you walk up to a mic, if it's not doing that, fix it. Okay.
Is it easier for you to get into character in a play when it's a long stretch as you being that character, or in a movie when it's just scenes?
Well, it's different. I know, it's just different. I work differently for a film. Some films have rehearsals. I've had, like, Moonstruck was 2 weeks, Still in Magnolia was 2 weeks, Dad was a week. I did a television series called Tales of the City, that was about a week. I mean, of course, that's not compared to the stage, but at least it's something. And, but what I do with a film is, again, I try to figure out, they tell you what the schedule is, and I try to stay a week ahead so that I've learned the lines, say for this next week coming up, I'll have the lines and the date, and I'll keep reviewing the whole week, concentrating on the scene we're going to do the next day, but I will spend my time, my evenings mostly, or the late afternoon in the evening, just working on the scenes, going over them and over them, and I play them out myself, and I change the lines, and then I alter this and that, and sometimes I go to the directors and I say, look, can I say this? And I don't like this. I like to cut as many lines as possible, so I do that, and sometimes I negotiate and manage to get the script where I feels really more comfortable for me. But it's a different process. It's not, you don't walk into a room with a group of people and make it. You're by yourself. And for the most part. And then you get on the set and they'll say, okay, rehearsal. So you go and you rehearse. But the director usually has already figured out where he wants you to go and everything, so it's not really open. Although some people just say, go ahead, do whatever you want. And then they watch you, and sometimes they take things you take, and other times they don't. So they say, okay, thank you. Now we rehearse for camera. That was like a fast, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30, but no, that's really too long. 15, 20. Now the camera comes in, and you do the same thing for the camera. And they figure out their problem. Say, okay, everybody go away, and then they light it. And then you come back, and then you shoot it. And that is the most rehearsal you get. So that means you've got to do a lot of rehearsing your own. You have to figure out how to work on your own by yourself, how you manage to. And I didn't. The first time I did a movie, I'll tell you, I felt like they sent a plumber to do a gardener's job. I mean, honestly, it was unreal, unreal. And as a matter of fact, it got so spooky, I had to ask my sister-in-law if she'd come and just sit there, so there was something familiar in the room. I couldn't, no.
Thank you.
Okay.
Was there ever a time where you were doing a scene or a play and you messed up a line? And if so, how did you recover from that?
Oh my God, that happens a lot. Well, what I do is if I miss, you mean if I fumble and stumble and, well, I try to straighten it out. I'll do one or two things. I'll either decide whether or not I should clean it up and say it correctly, or whether I should just forget about it and go on. And forget about it and go on is not a bad choice. It's not, it's why labor it so much,
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
When you find yourself struggling with learning your lines, how do you basically get yourself to be able to learn those lines if for some reason you can't memorize them? how do you get it so that you can memorize
Right.
them? What do you do?
Yeah, well, everybody, finds their own way this way. There's no, I can tell you things I do, other people will tell you, but eventually you find your own way. For me, it's important to really know what the story is. That means, what is everybody trying to do in the scene? So everything I'll say will come as a result of what I'm trying to do, given the obstacles that I have. That's what it'll be about. So you can read it and see how that person, what they're saying and what they're doing to confront the obstacle or the conflict that they have, because everything in a play is about conflict. Big conflict is people are fighting and killing each other. A little teeny conflict is they're making love. But that's it. There's all this, it's always about conflict. So you always look for, what's the conflict? What's the problem here? What's at stake for me here? And the lines will line up behind that point of view. Then if you look at the text, you'll see that there are these things called beats. In this particular section, we're talking about this, then there's a transition, and now we're talking about this. So you begin to see, there's a scheme to it. It's not this morass of lines. There's actually a structure. There's actually a plan. The writer actually is moving this character through, through these moments. So if you begin to understand that, you then begin to know, I see at the beginning they're talking about this because he's talking about this because he needs this, and then the other character does this and he doesn't, now he's not going to try that way anymore, he's going to try another way, and then the dialogue follows. So you really have to look at the story and what keeps the story going forward and that's what I do. And then I repeat the lines, a couple of times, say them over and over again. I try to deal with small clumps, not long. I'll do one beat and then, understand that one. Do the second beat, maybe the third, and then go back and review all those three things over and over and over again. The next day, when I come back to work, I go back to this, because you learn something and then you lose it. There's a pattern, you lose it. So you have to go back. It's like it takes 3 times maybe until finally it's gotten in. And that doesn't mean you're stupid or not talented. It just means that's the process. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, hi. With the skills that you've learned, throughout your acting career and your lifetime, what would you say to aspiring actors? Whether it would be, technical, social, advice, or anything?
Well, I guess it depends upon what an actor, what you really need, what you're really thinking about, what's concerning you.
What's one valuable lesson that you've learned throughout your...
What's the most valuable lesson? Well, it's to endure. Chekhov, I don't know, do you read Chekhov in high school? I don't know. You do, some of you do. Okay, in The Seagull, she has Nina saying, it's not what we thought of in our youth, Chekhov, it's not fame and fortune, but to endure and to carry our cross and have faith. And she says, and when I think of my work, I'm not afraid of life anymore. So this thing of hanging in there, because you will disappoint yourself many times. And you'll see that other people are disappointed in you. And that will happen. And that's painful. It's a painful thing. And those humiliations are painful. And so your willingness to endure that, I think, is probably the most important thing. You ought to read that play, The Seagull.
Great, thanks.
have time for one more question. The other questions can be asked afterwards, but
After what?
after the formal session here, and if there's time.
Okay,
We have
this is,
classes that are going to be.
fine, I understand,
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you.
Yes.
You talked a lot about how the racial tension when you were a child shaped you, but do you think that you were equally as influenced by other major events in history like the Vietnam War, Watergate? Do you think those shaped you as well?
Yes, well, that's true, but I was relating mostly to Somerville. That's what I was doing. But yes, all of these things have. 9/11 certainly has, but the Vietnam War in the 60s was really big. I mean, because I was in New York at the time, and there were many demonstrations, and I mean, I remember teaching. I was teaching at the time, and I was at the graduate school at NYU, and the building I was in was on 2nd Avenue, which runs from north to south, and many was the time we heard this incredible roar as people, crowds, thousands, would come down that street from the UN, just come down, you know, and all of those things, and the drug stuff was big. The drug stuff was major.
Well, thank you.
That was what happened with students. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Okay.
I'd like to thank everyone for being here. We have a couple of presentations, a small way of saying thank you, and I want to invite, I understand Arlington has a presentation that they would like to make, so
Where are the Arlingtonians?
all on that side.
Ah, okay.
And we're reading a seagull, right?
You what?
We're in the middle of reading a seagull.
Are you? Well, they're doing the cherry orchard at Huntington. It's,
Hello, we'd just like to thank you for being such an inspiration and inviting us here to hear you speak. So thank you very much.
She doesn't know what it is. I'll tell you what it is. Money. Is that you? Somebody, what is this? I think it's a Somerville High School stamp. What do you think it is? Whoa, no, it's a high school thing. That's very handsome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. No, it's Arlington. Sorry, it's Arlington. Not Somerville, it's Arlington. Is the quarter significant?
And next, from Somerville High School, Jessica Train has a presentation from Mr. Dukakis.
Oh, all right.
We just wanted to thank you so much for coming, and we really appreciate having you come here, and we really liked hearing what you had to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good. There it is, Somerville High.
And next, I'm going to invite Stephanie Mendez, and I'd like to invite Miss Magnum to come up here, too. We have a small presentation for her. Please come up.
Thank you so much for bringing Miss Olympia down here for us, and thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm actually making these presentations on, this is on behalf of the Somerville aspect of the event today. So this is actually a historic picture of Somerville Theater and a little book here that's actually all about the Somerville Theaters, Lost Theaters of Somerville.
The Lost Theaters of Somerville.
Yes, yes.
Olympia probably went to the Strand.
Yes.
Union Square and the Orpheum.
I mean, the names are familiar. Do they still have that place? There was a park down here where the carnivals used to come. Is there a place down there below Union Square?
Yes, down.
Is there a park down there?
That is, it is Lincoln Park and Conway Park.
I have no idea. That's where, that, I remember those fondly. Those and the ponds of Arlington High School. Where everybody had a stick and...
Spy Pond.
Yeah, Spy Pond. Well, that's where the tennis courts were. Is that where the tennis courts are over there? They're still there. Wow. And there was a track and field thing that we used to do over there, too. They still do track and field over at Spy Pond? At the high school now.
They run around Spy Pond.
Do you still play field hockey? Really? All right. And what about the basketball team? Anybody here from basketball? All right. And tennis? Who's from the tennis team? All right. Go, girl, go. Yeah, it's good, it's good. Oh, look at this. This is great. Oh, I'm going to show this to my brother. Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow. Oh, thank you.
And Olympia
Oh,
as well.
stop,
We have
please.
this. This is from both of us, Arlington and Somerville.
Arlington and Somerville.
And it's a
Do you,
card
what do you,
from
do you
me.
play each other at something? Yeah. Everything. But nothing is as bad as Medford, right? that's what I remember. We were like, oh, Medford. Oh, it's from the gallery. Oh, beautiful. Oh.
It's actually from a Malden artist.
A Malden artist. Yes. It looks like a family or something. This, with thanks. Oh, she's an Arlington High School graduate. This, the person who did.
I actually don't know if that's the case or not.
That's what it says here. Okay, do you all have to go now to some other class? Is that what's... He had to go. You have to go.
I don't have to, but they have to go back to class.
Oh, I see.
But Ms. Dukakis said that she would stay here for a few minutes. Those of you who would like to take pictures, so we could do this in an orderly fashion, and then I know our teachers have classes to get back to. So if you wouldn't mind hanging around for a few more minutes.
No, don't mind at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. What's your name?
Denitra. D-E.
What?
D-E-N-I-E-T-R-A.
What?
T-R-A. Denitra.
Denitra. What a lovely name. What is it?
It's made up.
The what?
It's made up.
Oh, you made